Innocently, I followed her, but I didn't know she had other plans. So she went into a building. I didn't know it was a club, and she came out with two guys. They were Indian. And I fall in the bed, and then they were just making a lot of noise. And when I was trying, like, I want to shout and cry and all that, they covered my mouth, and from there I couldn't feel myself again until very late at night.
Thank you very much, viewer, for visiting my YouTube channel. This is the channel where we inspire you with the stories of people who have won the race, or people who are succeeding or winning, and people who have gone through difficult moments.
Jesus, 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 my Redeemer. Jesus, Jehovah, King of Kings, I love you.
And the reason we do this is because we want you to learn from the lives of other people. We want you to have practical, real life stories of people with faces like you whom God is using. Today, we want to focus on Romans chapter 8 and verse 35. The author of Romans says, "What shall separate us from the love of God?" That's a great question. What shall separate us from the love of God? And you know, when I think about that question, I always ask myself, are the things that are listed there, are they the only things that in the author's perspective are so difficult and so hard that they can easily separate somebody? Or are they only the things that are within the experiences of the author? Whatever the answer to that question is, the question is, what can separate us from the love of God? And a whole list of things are mentioned there. Persecution, famine, nakedness, death, so many things, hardships, so many things, hates. And among all those things, probably there are some things, some of those things that at one point or the other in your life may have almost separated you from the love of God. But today, I just want us to focus on the conclusion, the answer that the author gives to that question. He concludes and answers the question himself and says, "Nay, no, in all these things we are more than conquerors through Christ, who died and who loved us." Meaning, nothing can separate us from the love of God. We are more than conquerors in Christ. But you know, my viewer, the reality of the matter is, sometimes we go through difficult moments in life and we feel like giving up. We feel like we really don't want to continue in ministry, with our vision, wherever we are committed. We feel like really we don't want to continue, even in the Christian faith. But today I bring you the story of a girl by the name Deborah, or if you want to call her Veronica, Guguru. This is my daughter, whom I brought up in faith in our children's homes. And Deborah had gone through, call it hell, or call it one of the things that are mentioned in Romans chapter 8, but she had gone through so much at her age. I do not want to mean that what Deborah went through is probably the hardest thing one can go through in life, but at her age, what she went through before she fell into the hands of GOA Compassion Department, before she fell into our hands as Glory Outreach Assembly, this baby, this girl, went through a difficult moment. Suffering, persecution, torture. But I want you to listen to her story directly from her and judge for yourself. Judge shall anything, is there anything that can separate you from the love of God? And why do I think that you need to listen and make your own decision and judgment? Is because today, having gone through all that, Deborah is a manager of one of our children's home called GOA Kieni West, having a responsible staff, taking care of 30 children and overseeing everything and doing it perfectly. And when you go through this home, you see her leadership, you see her management, you see the business mind in her, leading and driving the home towards self-sustainability, building teamwork, having gone through what she has gone through. I bet once you listen to this story, you will stop crying over small things that you are going through. And I don't want to belittle what you are going through, but I'm sure once you listen to this and then learn what Deborah is doing, you change your mind. Thank you for visiting this YouTube channel. And once you hear the story of Deborah, please pray for Deborah. And if you want to reach out to her, let me know and I will connect you with her. May the Lord bless you. Thank you. Keep coming to this channel for greater inspiration.
Mungu wangu Baba ni wa ajabu, na matendo yake ni ya kushangaza. Mungu wangu Baba ni wa ajabu.
My name is Deborah Ruguru Wamoyo, but that's the name I gave myself. When I was born, I was given the name Veronica Karim Wamoyo by my mom. And as I continue telling my story, you will come to understand why I end up changing my name. So I was born at Kirinyaga County, Geshogo Division, in a village called Keruvora. And by the time I knew myself, or I came to realize myself, I found myself having only one parent, a mother, who at some point I didn't feel like she was my mom, because she was this very harassing, and she could beat me often with no reason, without a good reason. And at the age of 7, she introduced me to child labor. At that time, I had other siblings. I had 2 sisters behind me. And being that I was now the firstborn, my mom felt like I was old enough to earn her some money. And she gave me out to some neighboring women who had young babies and needed a nanny to take care of their babies while they work in tea plantation. So that's how I started working at the age of 7, and the life continued. And at one point, when I can't even tell how old I was, because then I didn't even know when I was born, so I could not tell how old I was. By the time one of my relatives came home, and she promised to take me to school because I had not stepped in a class. And that was a good news to me, and I was so happy about it. And my mom accepted the offer, and so I followed my relative. Actually, she was a far relative, because she was a stepmother, no, a sister to a stepmother of my mother. Because when my first grandmother died, my grandfather married a second wife. And that second wife now, her sister, was the one who came for me with a promise of taking me to school. I was so happy, and I followed her. But when we reached her home, she was staying at a place called Kagio, and she had this big school called St. Catharines Teachers College. And when we got there, the promise was never fulfilled. Like, I was never taken to school. In fact, I was given some work to do. I was given responsibility of taking care of the piglets and chicken, sweeping the compound, and I could be sent to shop. Those were the things that I was doing when I was there. So one day it happened that I was just doing my normal duties, and accidentally I forgot to close the borehole after fetching some water. And when I was doing that, every time I could let the piglet pray around so I can clean their house. And it happened that day I forgot to close the borehole after fetching water, and one of the piglets fell in there. And so when my grandmother was called and she was informed what had happened, she said that since I was the one who was responsible for that, I should get myself in there and take that piglet out. Being there for the time I was there, I could see that place was not safe, because sometimes when we were fetching water, we could see some snake coming out of the hole, since Kagio is in Mwea, and Mwea is a hot place. And so animals like snake, when they can't bear the hotness on the surface, they look somewhere cold. And so most of the time they hide in those boreholes. So every time I could see so many snakes coming out of the borehole. And so when I was told to go in there, I feared for my life, and I felt so bad. And that's when I decided to run away from that place, and I went to Nairobi. And that is the reason I ended up composing the song Wira Wakwa, because I felt like the pig was more important than me. And that's why in the song I say, Hede one wada menyire guru yede tokugera. Hede one wada menyire guru yede tokugera. So I felt like the piglet was more important than me, since I was told to go inside there and get it. So when I ran away from home, I went to Nairobi. I was still I wouldn't say I was young, but then having that I don't have this big body. So even in Matatu, people thought I was just a kid. And so they never asked me for transport, and they never asked me who I was with, because maybe they assumed I was with one of the women or one of the men in the Matatu. On getting to Nairobi, I was so scared and confused, because it was my first time in the city, and I was almost knocked down by a coast bus, and that attracted the crowd, and so many people came gathering, asking questions like, what is happening, who is with this girl, why is she not careful crossing the road and all that. But that time, being that I had not stepped in a school since I was born, I couldn't speak Swahili. I could only speak Kikuyu, and not the normal Kikuyu, the Geshogo one. So not everybody could understand what I was saying. But then it happened that one of the women, and she was a Kamba, she could understand a bit of Kikuyu, and she took me aside and she asked me questions like what I was doing there and why am I there, and I explained to her everything that had happened to me. She promised to take me back home, but then knowing what was there, I was so much afraid, and I was not ready for it. And so I said no, and I promised her that even if she take me back, I will fall, I will just come back again to the city. Seeing that I was so much determined on what I was feeling about going back home, she decided to go with me to her place. And I stayed with her for about a week. And then by the time, when we got to a house, she had already packed, like everything was packed, and she was ready to go back to Makueni, where was her village. And she told me, since I was a Kikuyu and she's a Kamba, she can't go with me because people will start saying that she had stolen a child since she was childless, and people knew that from the community. So the only way she could help me was to look for somewhere where I could stay, and she connected me with a neighbor woman who accepted to stay with me. In return, I could take care of her baby while she goes to the market, because she was working at Githurai 45 that time. So I stayed with her for quite some time, and then I started getting influence from the girls in the plots, other house helps, because for me I was working now like a house help, and they were asking me like, hey, why are you not buying new clothes, and do you even get paid? And I told them, no, I don't get paid. My employee is keeping my money and she'll give it to me one day. And so they were like, no, you're very stupid. You can't stay here. You need to get yourself a job. And so that's what happened. I I decided to follow their advice. So one day, they told me they were to take me somewhere where I could get some help, somewhere I could get somebody who will employ me and pay me good amount. So when we went there, I would say I was on demand, because everybody those days, nobody wanted to employ a grown-up. Everybody wanted to employ a young girl who they could control. And so that's how I got my first job in Nairobi now, with a promise of a salary. And I went through bureau. And that time, the owner of the bureau realized that so many people wanted to employ me, because everybody could come and could go with me. And he gave me very, very clear instructions, like when I go to a place, I should not be there for more than 2 weeks. I should come back to the bureau, leaving everything. And that's what I used to do. And in return, he was making money. So it continued like that for quite some time, until one day I got a job at a very good place, in a very good house. Everybody in that family was loving and kind to me. And the mother of the family had the kids who are almost my age. So we could get together, we could get along very well. And after some times, I started again feeling like I want to go home. I started missing my mom, as much as she was bad and I feared her. I started missing her and I wanted to go back home. So one day when we went to church, I told her kids not to wait for me, and I told them that I wanted to wait for the second service, because most of the time we were attending first service in a PCA church in somewhere called Keno. So I told them, no, today I'm attending both services, so don't give me the key. I will not be coming early. But my plan was to run away from that home, because every time I could tell that woman I want to go home, she could tell me, no, the day you'll go home, I'll be the one taking you. You'll just have to be patient with me. And for me, it was taking forever. So that day, I boarded a matatu to Nairobi. And being that since the first day I got to Nairobi, I had not gone to town again, so I didn't know town very well. And so when I got there, at that time, matatus were dropping people at Grop Cinema roundabout, and that's where I was dropped. And when I was dropped there, I couldn't find my way to Tea Room, where I knew I could board a matatu to Kirinyaga. So I saw her ready, and I asked her for direction, being that woman, sometimes she could talk to us and she could tell us that anytime you get lost, you should not ask strangers for direction. You should only ask either a woman or a security guard or not everybody. So that day I just trusted that lady, and I asked her for direction, and she promised to take me to the stage herself. And and so we went for quite some time. We were just walking, and it became dark, and she told me it was not possible to keep going again, and so she wanted me to go to her place, spend the night there, and in the following morning she could take me to the stage. Innocently, I followed her, but I didn't know she had other plans. So she went into a building. I didn't know it was a club, and she came out with two guys. They were Indian, and I kept following them. So we went to another building. We went upstairs and we went into a room. In the room there was bed, there was table. Yeah, and being that I had seen such a house before, where I was staying first in Githurai, the house was the same. We had only one chair, but it was a 3-seater chair, and then we had a table, and then there was bed, and there was curtain. So for me, I just felt like this is the normal house. It's only that this one doesn't have a curtain. And after staying there for like 10 minutes, this lady said that she wanted to get something from the shop, and she excused herself. And I was left alone with the two stranger men. So I stayed there, and they were just smoking, and they were just talking, and I couldn't hear what they were saying. And at that point, I was speaking a little bit of Swahili, although not very fluent, but I could speak 2 or 3 words of Swahili. And after staying there for quite some time, I started feeling unsafe, and I wanted to go out. So I told them I want to go out and look after her because she had prolonged her stay. When I was trying to go out, they pushed me and said that the plan could not work. And they said that we had a plan with that woman. So they said that they had paid her, and so they wanted to sleep with me. So I didn't understand any of it, because at that time I didn't know what it means when a man says, I want to sleep with you. So I just became so, I would say, stubborn, because I wanted to go out and they didn't want that. So when I was trying to open the door, they pushed me, slapped me, and I fall in the bed. And then they were just making a lot of noise. And when I was trying, like, I want to shout and cry and all that, they covered my mouth, and from there I couldn't feel myself again until very late at night. And I woke up with this pain, and they were still there, and they could take me to shower, and they were just doing a lot of things to me. It was very hurting, and I up today I've never understood why that had to happen to me. I won't say that I'm still hurting, because I've tried to accept that it happened, and I want the healing. But that was the most painful thing in my life.
Viewer, what do you think? I think it's sad. It's sad to listen to those kind of experiences, particularly facing a young girl like Deborah. Very sad indeed. But you know what? God allows things to come through our life, knowing very well that they'll turn out for the good. That's why the scripture in Romans chapter 8 and verse 28 says, all things work together for good to those who love the Lord. I don't want to imagine that one must go through what Deborah went through for something good to come out of it. Neither do I even want to imagine that there would be anything good. But I want you to know there is hope in that story that you have just listened to. Look out for part 2 of Deborah's story. And once you hear that, you learn to appreciate the struggles, the suffering, the pain that we go through, because vision is sometimes birthed out of difficult circumstances.
Come and sing with me, celebrate with me. We have a reason to praise the Lord.